Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller, your quiet companion for tonight's dark and chilling journey. So dim the lights, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let these terrifying stories slowly pull you into sleep. If you're still awake in the next 5 minutes, I'll be surprised. But before we begin, tell me down in the comments, which city are you listening from tonight? And what horror topic should I cover in the next video? Now relax, and let the nightmares begin. I don't really know how to start this, because I still can't fully wrap my head around it. I've been holding on to this story for a while now, but something about it keeps nagging at me. Maybe it's because the last time I told anyone, they brushed it off as just a weird coincidence or a case of paranoia. But I know what I felt, what I experienced. I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was the fall of 2017. I was 28 years old at the time, and I had just moved back to my hometown in Arizona after a few years of living in Phoenix. I needed a change, I guess. Things hadn't been going well in the city, and honestly, I just felt a little worn out by the whole big city vibe. So, I decided to go back to my roots, rent a small apartment, and start fresh. The drive from Phoenix to my new place was long. About 3 hours on a stretch of highway that's mostly flat desert, with a few lonely gas stations along the way. To put it simply, it was the kind of road that felt like it stretched on forever, especially when you're driving at night. That night, it was quiet. I remember the air was dry and the stars were bright. One of those nights where the sky feels so clear you think you might be able to reach out and touch it. But the highway? Completely deserted. No other cars, just me and the headlights illuminating this endless, barren stretch of road. I had been driving for about 2 hours, around 11:30 p.m., when I first saw her. She was standing on the shoulder, right by a bend in the road. A woman, probably in her late 20s. She had long brown hair, a loose jacket, and was carrying a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. At first, I thought it was just a figment of my imagination. This road wasn't exactly a popular hitchhiking spot, you know. I slowed down, and she stuck out her thumb, her eyes wide and expectant. I wasn't one for picking up hitchhikers. My mom always warned me about it, and to be honest, I always thought it was a little risky. But this time, something about her seemed normal. She didn't look crazy or disheveled, and there was something in her eyes that made me feel like she just needed help. I don't know why, but I pulled over. She got in the passenger seat without a word and slid the door shut behind her. "Thanks for stopping," she said, her voice quiet but polite. She didn't sound like someone who had been stranded out there for hours, or like she had some story ready to tell. She just seemed tired. "Yeah, no problem. Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to make small talk. "Just down the road a bit," she replied, looking out the window, her gaze distant. I nodded and kept driving, the headlights cutting through the black night. I didn't ask too many questions, because she didn't seem to want to talk. For the first few miles, it was just the sound of tires humming against the asphalt. Then, out of nowhere, she turned her head toward me and said, "You're going to make a left turn in about 3 miles. There's a gas station there." I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a gas station up ahead," I said, my voice trailing off. She gave a small, half-smile and looked back out the window, her face still pale in the dim light of the dashboard. It didn't sit well with me, but I tried to brush it off. Sometimes people just notice things, right? Maybe she had been on that road before, or maybe she had seen the gas station sign from the corner of her eye. But as I kept driving, I noticed something else. It wasn't just that she knew about the turn. It was the way she said it, like she knew what was coming. Like she had already seen it happen. It's hard to explain, but you know how when you're driving late at night, you start thinking about random things? Sometimes your brain just goes into autopilot, and you're not really paying attention to the road. That's what I was doing. I was zoning out a little, my eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror, when she suddenly said, "You'll get a call in about 5 minutes. Someone's going to need you." The way she said it made me freeze, my foot jerking on the gas pedal. "What?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I was definitely unsettled now. She glanced over at me, still with that same weird smile. It'll be your brother. He'll call. He's going to need you." I didn't respond. My mind was racing. My brother? I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. He was living in California, far away from me. I thought he was doing fine, so why would he need me? Why would she know about him? I hadn't even told anyone I was driving this late tonight. But then, just like she said, my phone rang. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I pulled it from my pocket. Sure enough, it was my brother. I hesitated, but I answered. "Hey man, what's up? Listen, I need you to do something for me. It's important." His voice was shaky, not his usual confident self. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling my stomach twist. "I can't talk right now. Just drive to the gas station at the next exit. I'm not alone." The line went dead before I could respond. My heart started racing. I glanced over at the woman sitting next to me. She was staring straight ahead, her lips pressed together like she was waiting for something. I didn't know what to make of it, but I knew one thing. My brother was in trouble. I was about to ask the woman how she knew that, but before I could say anything, she turned to me and whispered, "You're not going to stop at the gas station." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "You'll pass it. You'll keep driving," she said, her voice oddly calm, like she knew exactly how things would unfold. And then something clicked. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't sure why, but suddenly, I knew she wasn't just some random hitchhiker. She wasn't even human. Something about her was off. Too perfect. Too knowing. I didn't stop at the gas station. Instead, I drove right past it, ignoring the gut instinct that told me to pull over. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let myself stop. I had to keep going. But as I passed the gas station, I noticed something strange. There was a car parked there, a beat-up sedan with its lights off, just sitting there in the darkness. I couldn't see who was inside, but I felt like they were watching me. The woman didn't say a word, just kept staring ahead, like she was waiting for something. I could hear my brother's voice echoing in my head. "I'm not alone." Suddenly, the woman spoke again. "Your brother's not at the gas station. He's somewhere else now. Somewhere you'll never find him." I didn't know how to respond. My heart was pounding in my chest. And then she did something that made my blood run cold. She reached over and touched my arm, her fingers ice cold. I swerved, nearly running off the road. When I looked up again, the road was different. The surroundings had changed. The trees were gone. There was no sign of civilization. Just miles and miles of barren desert. I was no longer on the highway I had known. "What the hell?" I gasped. "You're not going to make it out of here," she said. I knew then that I had to get away. I didn't know how or why, but I had to. My instincts kicked in. I slammed on the gas, swerving around a sharp bend in the road. I couldn't hear her anymore. I didn't know if she was still sitting next to me. I didn't care. I just had to get out of there. Eventually, I made it back to the highway I recognized. I don't know how, but I did. And by the time I reached my apartment, I couldn't even remember how I got there. I never saw her again, never heard from her. But I'm telling you, there was something about her, something that wasn't right. Something that doesn't belong in this world. And that night, it changed everything. I still can't shake the feeling that something's following me. That someone or something knows things about me I shouldn't know. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I hear a voice in my head whispering my name. Story 2. I've been a trucker for over 15 years. I'm used to the lonely stretches of highway, the endless miles, the dark roads that seem to go on forever. The kind of roads that are almost too quiet, where you can hear the hum of your engine more than anything else, where the only sound is the occasional rustle of wind against your truck. It's a life that gets lonely sometimes, but after a while, you start to get used to it, to the silence, to the isolation. But I'll tell you something, there are moments out there on those roads that you can't shake off, no matter how many years pass. And the one I'm about to tell you, well, it's something I'll never forget. It happened on a road that doesn't even show up on most maps anymore, not officially anyway. It's a stretch of highway that's mostly forgotten, left to time, or maybe something else. I didn't know it back then, but I wasn't just driving through that night. I was being pulled into something far worse. It was late in the evening, maybe around 1 a.m. I had just crossed into the outskirts of a town I couldn't even remember the name of. I don't know why, but there's something about these sleepy places that feels different. Something off, but it was quiet. The kind of quiet that was almost comforting after a long day's drive. No cars, no trucks, not a single person on the road. Just me, the truck, and the wind. But then I saw it. A construction zone. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner, but there it was, set up right in the middle of nowhere. Bright orange cones, flashing yellow lights, the whole deal. I remember thinking how odd it was. Why would they be working out here, in the middle of the night, in such an isolated spot? And that's when I saw the bridge. It was an old thing, one of those narrow, rusty steel structures that didn't seem like it could hold a family sedan, let alone a truck like mine. And it was half destroyed. Some kind of wreck had clearly taken out a large portion of it. You could see where they'd begun repairs. New beams were jetting out from the side of the road like raw, exposed nerves. The workers, though, that's what made me stop. There were a few of them, dressed in neon yellow vests, moving slowly, like they were part of the landscape. At first, I told myself it was just the fog. Maybe it was playing tricks on my eyes. But then I saw one of them turn, just for a second, and I caught a glimpse of their face. Their eyes, they didn't look real. Hollow, empty, like they were staring at something far away, something I couldn't see. I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. I don't know why, but I didn't stop to ask if they needed help. I should have, shouldn't I? But I kept going. I told myself it was probably just some late-night roadwork crew trying to meet some deadline. And then things started to get strange. As I passed through the zone, something about it felt off. The lights were too bright, like they'd been on for far too long. And there was this hum, like an electric buzz in the air, coming from somewhere behind me. But when I glanced in my rearview mirror, the workers were gone. I could see the orange cones still lined up along the road, but the figures were nowhere to be seen. Just the fog rolling and like it had been waiting for me to drive through. I should have turned around right then. Should have driven away. But I kept going. That's when I started hearing it, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps coming from the other side of the road. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear them, moving as if they were walking right alongside my truck. I looked at the side mirror, but there was nothing. Just the fog thickening as I drove on. My heart started to race. Something wasn't right. Then came the flashing lights. Not from my truck. From the road. Bright, blinding lights, like a car was approaching from the opposite direction. But I didn't see anything. No headlights. No car. Just the lights, flashing in a pattern, like someone was signaling me, trying to get my attention. I wasn't sure if I should stop. I was alone, and there was something in the air that didn't feel right. So I kept going. And as I did, I heard the voice. It was faint at first, like it was coming from far away. But then it grew louder. A man's voice, raspy, like it was trying to reach me through the fog. I couldn't make out the words, but I swear I heard it clearly, right before the bridge. Right before it happened. The truck slammed into something, an impact so hard it felt like the entire world shook. But when I opened my eyes, I was still on the road. I looked around. The fog was gone. The construction zone was gone. The workers, the flashing lights, the footsteps, they were all gone. I was in the middle of nowhere again, but this time, something had changed. Something wasn't right. I pulled over. I don't know why I did it, but I needed a moment to breathe. I got out of the truck, feeling the cool night air on my skin, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest. That's when I saw it. The wreck. It was like I had never left. The bridge. The twisted metal. The truck, my truck, crashed into the side, mangled beyond recognition. I could hear the sound of the crash in my head, feel it in my bones. But the worst part was the people. They were there. The workers. The ones I'd seen earlier, the ones with hollow eyes. They were standing around the wreck, watching me. But they weren't moving. Not in any way a person should move. They just stood there, staring like statues, like they were waiting for something. For me. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. But when I looked up again, the fog had returned. And so had the workers. I didn't stay to find out what they wanted. I jumped back in my truck, slammed the door shut, and gunned the engine. I drove through that fog, faster than I ever had before, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The road stretched on forever. It felt like I was trapped in a loop, over and over. Each time I passed that bridge, the wreck was waiting for me. The workers, their hollow eyes, always waiting, always watching. That's when I realized I wasn't just driving through a construction zone. I was stuck, reliving the crash, over and over again, like some kind of twisted, never-ending loop. At first, I tried everything. Stopping the truck, turning around, taking different routes, but it didn't matter. I couldn't escape. I'd end up back there with the wreck, with the workers, and that damn fog. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to get away. How many times I've driven through that same stretch of road. Each time it's the same thing. The same wreck, the same workers, the same flashing lights, the same voice in the fog. I don't know why they're still there, why they're stuck in that loop. Maybe they're waiting for something. Maybe it's me. Maybe they're waiting for me to crash again. I don't drive that stretch of highway anymore. I don't go near it. I don't even like to think about it. But every now and then, when I close my eyes, I can hear the voice. I can see their eyes. And I know deep down, I'm not the only one stuck there. So if you ever find yourself on a lonely stretch of road, somewhere deep in the fog, don't stop. Don't look, and don't let them see you. Because once you do, you might not leave. Story 3. I want to share something that happened to me about 2 years ago. I've been meaning to tell this story for a while now, but I've kept putting it off. Not because I didn't want to, more like I was afraid it would get in my head again. I still feel a little off talking about it, but maybe it'll help me get some closure. So my name is Sarah, and at the time this all happened, I was 27. I lived in a small town in upstate New York. Nothing special about it, small, quiet, surrounded by woods, with just one main highway running through it. If you wanted to go anywhere remotely bigger, you had to drive for at least an hour. I had a pretty normal life. I worked as a graphic designer for a marketing company that let me work from home, so my days mostly consisted of sitting in front of my laptop, coffee in hand, staring at the same four walls. I was single, didn't have many friends, just the usual. But it wasn't a bad life. It was comfortable, I guess. I remember that night so clearly, though. It was a Thursday, late October, around 10:30 p.m. I had just finished a project, and I felt like I needed to get out of the house for a bit. So, I decided to take a drive. I've always liked driving at night. It's peaceful. No one else on the road, just the hum of the tires and the glow of streetlights passing by. But that night, something felt different. I didn't really think much of it at the time, though. Just some minor unease in the back of my head, something I brushed off. But as I pulled onto the highway and started heading out of town, I saw something behind me. A set of headlights in the rearview mirror. I wasn't bothered by it at first. It's not unusual to see cars driving late at night, especially on the highway. But then I noticed something strange. The car never seemed to make a sound. I couldn't hear its engine. I thought maybe I had the radio up too loud or that I was just hearing things, but no. The hum of my own car was louder than the other one behind me. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, trying to make out the car behind me. It looked like a black sedan, nothing too unusual about it, but I couldn't see any headlights on the car. Just the shape, the outline, and those headlights that stayed a constant distance behind me, no matter how much I sped up or slowed down. I brushed it off again. Maybe the car had a muffler problem or something. But the longer I drove, the weirder it felt. It was like the car was glued to me. If I accelerated, it accelerated. If I slowed down, it slowed down. After a few minutes, I decided to speed up just to see if the car would do the same. I pushed my foot down on the pedal, my headlights cutting through the darkness as I sped past the occasional curve or bend in the road. But the car behind me, it didn't budge. It stayed right where it was, just behind me, always out of sight but always there. I started to feel a little uneasy, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they were just on the same route as me, right? It was a small highway after all. But when I took the first exit to get off the highway, just to do a little loop around a nearby parking lot, something strange happened. The car followed me. It wasn't just behind me anymore. It was right next to me in the lane beside me. I couldn't make out the driver at all, but the car's headlights were so dim, they barely lit up the pavement. It was almost as if the car itself was trying to be invisible. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? Should I pull into the nearest gas station and see if they'd leave me alone? But I didn't want to do anything that would make them think I was paranoid. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I decided to keep driving, but the whole time, that car stayed with me. It was almost like a game. A weird, unsettling game where I couldn't escape. The silence between us was thick, but I could feel it, like the car was always just a little too close for comfort. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but eventually, I glanced in the rearview mirror again, and that's when I saw it. The driver. They were just sitting there. Their face was staring straight ahead, not moving at all. I know it sounds weird, but I swear their head wasn't even turning with the car's movements. They were staring, unmoving, like they weren't even aware I was there. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know what to make of it. I'd heard about people following others late at night, but usually it was for a reason, like road rage or some kind of rivalry. But this felt different. This didn't feel like a person behind the wheel. It felt like a presence. Something detached, as if they weren't even human. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself I was overthinking things. But then, I made a decision. I'd turn onto the next exit and head back toward town. If the car followed me again, I'd know for sure that something was wrong. So, I took the next exit. I glanced over at the car again, and sure enough, it was still right there, a few car lengths behind me, matching my every turn. At this point, I couldn't deny it anymore. My heart was racing. I knew I had to get away from this car, but I didn't know how. I sped up again, but the car didn't fall behind. It stayed right there. The headlights were still dim, and the driver was still motionless. I thought maybe I could trick them. I took a sharp right turn, then another left, cutting through a small residential area that I knew would lead to a dead end. If I could just lose them for a moment, I'd have the chance to drive back toward my neighborhood and shake them off. But as I took that turn and glanced back, the car followed me again, like it knew where I was going exactly. I pulled into a nearby alley and slammed the brakes, hoping the car would finally pass me by. But the car didn't move. It just stopped right behind me. And then, for the first time, the headlights blinked off. The street was completely dark. I sat there in my car, frozen, not knowing what to do. Then, through the rearview mirror, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The driver wasn't alone. In the back seat, two figures sat. They were both completely still, their faces hidden by the shadows. And then I saw something I'll never forget. One of them lifted their hand, and I could see they were holding something. I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but it was too big to be a phone. It looked like a camera. They were holding a camera. That's when I realized. They weren't just following me. They had been following me for a long time. I slammed my car into reverse and sped backward, almost colliding with the dumpster behind me. The tires screeched as I swerved out of the alley, heart pounding. But I didn't stop driving. I didn't look back. I just kept going through the turns, the lights, until I got to my apartment, parked, and locked every door. I called the police that night, but when they came, they couldn't find the car. It had vanished. I never saw it again after that. But the worst part? I still have the feeling that it's out there, somewhere. Watching. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe it's nothing. But every time I drive alone at night now, I can't help but glance at the rearview mirror. And I wonder if maybe that car is still out there somewhere following me. So, if you're ever driving late at night, especially if you find yourself on a lonely highway, just remember, sometimes the scariest thing is not hearing anything at all. Story 4. It was late, almost 2 in the morning, and I was on the road again. You know how it is, the long stretches of highway that seem to go on forever, the monotonous hum of the tires on asphalt, the gentle pull of the wheel as I fought against the fatigue creeping in. I don't mind driving at night, It's when the world feels empty and quiet. It's peaceful in a way, with no one else around. But sometimes it's too quiet. Sometimes things start to feel off. I'm not the type to spook easily. I've done my fair share of solo road trips over the years, but this drive was different. I could feel it the second I pulled onto Route 51, a road I knew all too well. Empty. Lonely. Nothing out there but endless miles of blacktop and the occasional worn-out sign for gas stations long since closed. It had been a long day already. I'd left from a small town in Ohio, headed towards Chicago. I wanted to get a head start before the rush of morning traffic, and the night seemed like the perfect time to make some progress. The sky had been clear all day, but as the night wore on, the air felt heavier, like something was just waiting to shift. I'd been driving for about 3 hours when I first saw the truck. It wasn't anything extraordinary. A big rig, classic look, white with some faded red stripes, hauling some kind of cargo I couldn't make out from the distance. The strange part wasn't the truck itself, but the fact that I'd seen it already. Twice. At first, I thought I was just tired. Maybe I hadn't been paying attention, but the truck had passed me going the other way. A few minutes later, it was behind me, tailing me in my rearview mirror. Odd, I thought, but nothing I couldn't shake off. I made a few turns, went through some small towns, and kept going. Every time I'd glance in my rearview, there it was. Same truck. Same faded red stripes. At first, I thought maybe it was just a trucker on the same route, and I was imagining things. But after a while, I started to notice how close it was. It kept getting closer, even when I was going over the speed limit, even when I'd pull over to the shoulder and let it pass. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just too tired. Maybe it was a coincidence. But something about it didn't sit right. I wasn't a rookie driver. I'd been on the road plenty, and I knew how truckers were. But this truck, it was always there, following me no matter what I did. It didn't stop there. After a while, I noticed it wasn't just that truck. There were others, trucks, cars, things that weren't quite right. The roads were getting emptier, but I could still feel eyes on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, followed. The truck was like a shadow, growing closer with every passing mile. By the time I reached a stretch of highway with absolutely no other cars in sight, I was starting to panic. The truck wasn't just tailing me now. It was on me, creeping into my rear view like it had been there the whole time. I kept driving, but the sound of the engine behind me, that low hum, was enough to make my hands tremble on the wheel. And then it happened. I glanced to the side. There it was again, just off the side of the road. The truck, sitting there as if waiting for me, parked under a flickering street lamp. The eerie thing? The road was completely empty. No cars, no signs of life anywhere. Just the truck, its engine running in the dark. My heart started racing. I took a deep breath, tried to steady my nerves. This couldn't be real. I had to be imagining it. But when I drove past, just a few feet from the truck, I couldn't help but feel that unmistakable chill creep up my spine. Something about it felt wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be there. I pressed the gas pedal harder, hoping to put some distance between myself and whatever this was. A few miles later, I found myself on a quieter stretch of the road, no signs of that truck. I let out a sigh of relief. Maybe I had just been tired, too many hours on the road. I figured I'd pull off and stop for a minute, just to clear my head. Maybe grab some coffee. I pulled into an old diner that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The neon sign buzzed and flickered as I parked. When I stepped inside, the place was practically deserted. The lone waitress behind the counter looked up as I entered, and I gave her a tired smile. "Long night?" she asked. "Yeah," I muttered, sliding onto a stool. "You wouldn't believe it." She made a nonchalant noise as she wiped down the counter, and I couldn't help but notice that her eyes lingered on me just a little too long. Something about the way she looked at me made my skin crawl. She said something I didn't quite catch, so I just nodded. I hadn't been there more than 10 minutes when I stepped back outside, still feeling uneasy, that strange feeling creeping back. I looked at my car and froze. The truck. It was parked right there, across the street, under the same flickering streetlight. I swear, It hadn't been there when I walked in. My breath caught in my throat. How was that possible? I hadn't heard it pull in. I hadn't seen it before I went inside. But there it was, parked right in front of the diner. And this time, the driver's seat was occupied. I didn't know what to do. I stood there frozen, staring at the truck. My brain raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it wasn't the same truck, I thought. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But I knew deep down it wasn't. I could feel it in my bones. Without thinking, I stepped closer, my legs moving on their own. As I got nearer to the truck, my heart hammered in my chest. The dim glow from the streetlight barely illuminated the truck's cab, but I could see the driver, just barely, sitting there, still as a statue. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. I stood there for a long moment, my mouth dry, my mind spinning. I had to know what was going on. I had to confront this. But as I took another step forward, I felt a sharp, cold wind whip across my skin. That's when I saw it. The driver's side window slowly rolled down. I could barely make out the shape of a man, his face hidden in shadows. But I saw enough. He was staring at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That stare, I can't even describe it. It was like he was waiting for me to move, to do something. Like he had all the time in the world. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually something inside me snapped. I turned and ran back to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I drove off in a blind panic, not stopping until I reached the next town. It wasn't until later, when I was calm enough to think straight, that I realized something truly terrifying. There was no record of that truck. No mention of it in the town's history. No signs of any trucker ever stopping by. It was like the truck had never existed. The diner, the waitress, it was like they'd all been a part of the same illusion. I don't know who or what was behind that truck, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never be able to unsee it. So if you're ever driving along a stretch of empty highway late at night, and you see a big rig in your rearview mirror, just remember one thing. Some things don't want to be left behind. And sometimes, they'll follow you until you're too tired to keep running. And you'll wish you hadn't stopped. Story 5. I'm not the type of person to get paranoid or jump to conclusions when something strange happens. At least, I didn't think I was. But this was different. I can't even explain it fully, but what happened during that trip, it changed me. I guess I should start at the beginning. My name's Jake. I was 27 when this all happened, living in a small apartment in a quiet part of Boise, Idaho. Normal guy. Average job at a tech startup, hanging out with friends, nothing too exciting, but it was a life. And at the time, that felt good enough. I had a steady group of friends, and we'd go on road trips together whenever we could. A few drinks, a few laughs, nothing too wild. One weekend in mid-July, we decided to take a trip down to Salt Lake City, just to get away for a bit. Me, my buddy Brian, his girlfriend Emily, and Sarah, who had been Brian's best friend since high school. We figured it'd be a fun, laid-back weekend of exploring the city, maybe some hiking, a lot of good food. The kind of trip you'd tell people about, but never really get into the details. You know, the kind of trip where you look back and think, yeah, that was nice. We hit the road around 2 in the afternoon. It was sunny, the air smelled like dust, and the highway stretched out in front of us, empty for the most part. I remember how quiet it was, just the hum of the tires and the occasional passing car. I guess I didn't realize that's when things started to feel off. It was about halfway through the trip when we hit this stretch of highway, about 20 miles of nothing. Just endless road with stretches of forest on either side. No houses, no signs of life. A pretty desolate stretch, and none of us had been on that part of the highway before. It was the kind of place you wouldn't want to break down in. We passed a few cars, but nothing unusual. That's when it happened. Emily pointed out a car up ahead. At first, I thought nothing of it, just another car on the road, but the closer we got, I could tell something was wrong. It was an older sedan, kind of beaten up, and it was parked off the road, in the tall grass. That alone wouldn't have seemed strange, but there was something about the way it was positioned. The tires were barely touching the grass, like the car had been there for a while. "Do you think it broke down?" Emily asked from the back seat. I wasn't sure. It didn't look like anyone was inside. I just shrugged. Could be. Looks like it's been there a while though. We kept driving, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept glancing in the side mirror, staring at the car as it got smaller in the distance. It felt like we were being watched. It's weird how a thought like that just creeps into your mind out of nowhere. When we reached Salt Lake City, we didn't talk much about it. The trip was fun, dinners, sightseeing, a little hiking. But the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about that car. It bugged me like there was something I was missing. Something off. It wasn't until the drive back that things took a real turn. We were driving home late at night. The highway was empty again, the stars just starting to appear in the sky. There was this eerie quiet about the whole thing. No streetlights, no sounds except for the tires rolling over asphalt. It was that kind of quiet where your thoughts get louder and you start noticing things you'd usually ignore. We were about 10 miles out of Salt Lake City when I saw it. That same damn sedan. This time, it was on the side of the road again. It wasn't even just parked. It was almost like it was waiting for us. "What the hell?" Brian said from the driver's seat. "That's the same car from before." My stomach dropped. He was right. It was the same car, parked on the shoulder just like before, though this time, there were no signs of life. No lights on, no one in the car. I couldn't help but feel the tension building. It was too much of a coincidence. Something was off. Something didn't add up. Maybe they're just stranded? Sarah said from the back. They're probably waiting for a tow truck. I shook my head. I couldn't get rid of that feeling, like we were being watched. I kept my eyes locked on the car as we drove by, then glanced in the rearview mirror. And that's when I saw it, just a flicker of movement. The silhouette of a figure in the window. My heart slammed in my chest. There was someone in there. Someone who'd been watching us. "Guys, we're not stopping," I said. My voice was shaky. "We need to keep moving. No stopping. Not for anyone." The others looked at me, confused. Brian let out a nervous laugh. "Jake, it's fine. We'll be okay. It's probably nothing." I didn't believe him. Not for a second. We kept going. I swear I could feel my pulse in my throat. The quiet was suffocating. I kept expecting to hear the sound of a car following us, but there was nothing. Just the empty road ahead. It wasn't until we reached a gas station, about an hour later, that things started to escalate. We stopped to stretch our legs and grab some coffee. It was a small, rundown station. There was only one other car parked near the pumps. It wasn't until we were inside the store that I noticed something odd. The clerk was staring at me, not in a casual way, in a way that made me feel like he knew exactly who I was. I walked over to the counter, trying to shake off the feeling, but he kept watching me, his eyes never leaving my face. It was unsettling. "You folks driving down the highway?" he asked, his voice low. "Yeah, just on our way home," I replied, trying to sound casual. He nodded, still watching me like he knew something I didn't. "You be careful out there. Some strange things going on." I raised an eyebrow, thinking I had misunderstood. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he just gave me a look, a knowing, almost pitying look, and then turned back to the register. I paid for the coffee quickly, wanting to get out of there. As we pulled away from the gas station, I looked out the window and saw the sedan again. This time, it was parked across the street from the gas station, almost like it had been waiting for us to stop. "Jake, what's going on?" Emily asked from the back seat, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My stomach twisted as I thought back to the clerk's words. Some strange things going on. It was as if they knew we were being watched. And it wasn't just by a random stranger, it felt planned, like we were being led into something. The rest of the ride was a blur. The car seemed to follow us at a distance, never too close, but always there. When we reached the highway again, the sedan was nowhere to be seen. It just disappeared. The weird part? I didn't feel any relief. The unease just grew even stronger. Something was out there, and it was coming for us. It wasn't until a few days later, after we'd all gotten home, that we learned the truth. The news reported a string of disappearances along that very stretch of highway. The police said it was a series of random killings. There were no witnesses, no clear suspects, and no reason to connect the victims. But I knew better. I'd seen it. I'd felt it. There was a pattern. And somehow we'd been a part of it. I never saw that sedan again. I never found out who the man was. But that sense of being watched, it never really went away. And every time I drive down that highway now, I'm always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next thing I can't explain. You know, sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens to you. It's the quiet moments, the ones that leave you questioning whether it could happen again. And every time I hear that sound of tires on the road late at night, I wonder if I'm the next one being followed. Trust your gut. It's the only thing that might keep you alive. Story 6. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to share something like this. I'm not exactly a spooky story kind of person. I don't jump at every creak or crack, and I've never really been afraid of the dark. But what happened to me that night, it's still stuck with me. And I guess I'm telling you this because I want you to know, sometimes things happen that we can't explain, no matter how hard we try. So let me take you back. This happened about a year ago, just after I'd started working as a traveling consultant. At the time, I was in my late 20s, fresh out of grad school, and eager to get my career moving. It meant a lot of driving across the state for meetings, often late at night or in the early hours of the morning, depending on how far away the office was. On the night this all started, I was making my way home after a long day of meetings and driving. I had been on the road for about 6 hours, and the night was already wearing thin on me. I was in that zone where you're just going through the motions, muscle memory taking over as you try to stay awake. The highway was long and empty, with just the occasional truck speeding past. The kind of quiet that makes your mind wander, but not in a comforting way. You've probably been there, right? That kind of tired where you feel like you could almost fall asleep while your eyes are wide open, but you keep pushing yourself to stay alert. I'm sure I wasn't the only one in the world who's been on the road too long and just needed to stop. So around midnight, I saw the sign for a rest stop. It wasn't too far off, maybe a couple of miles. I figured I'd stretch my legs, grab a coffee, and maybe take a 5-minute break from the monotony of the road. Now, I've stopped at plenty of rest stops in my time. They're usually the same: a parking lot, some vending machines, bathrooms, and maybe a few picnic tables scattered around. Nothing special. But this one was different. As I pulled off the highway, I immediately noticed how strangely quiet it was. I mean, rest stops at night can be a little eerie, sure. But this was something else. There was no sound, no hum of a vending machine or the distant chatter of other travelers. No headlights, no car engines running in the background. Nothing. Just this unsettling stillness. I parked my car by the edge of the lot, right next to the path leading up to the building. It looked like the usual rest stop, one of those old, cement block buildings with the faded signs for restrooms. But there was something about it that felt off. It was too dark, for one. The overhead lights that usually illuminated these places seemed flickering and dim, like they hadn't been changed in years. I shrugged it off. Maybe the place was just run down, I thought. It wasn't like I had a lot of options in the middle of nowhere, so I stepped out of my car and started walking toward the building. I remember hearing my footsteps echoing off the pavement. That sound, that hollow noise, seemed to amplify in the quiet. The closer I got to the building, the more I noticed that it wasn't just abandoned, it was wrong. There was no sign for the bathrooms like you normally see. No vending machines in sight. Instead, there were just these rusted metal doors, and behind them, I could make out faint shadows like something was moving in there, but nothing that could be explained. I don't know why, but I felt a sudden chill run up my spine. It was the kind of feeling that makes you wonder if something's just a little bit off, just enough to make you feel like you should leave. But I kept going. I needed to stretch my legs, and the thought of driving another hour without a break wasn't appealing. When I reached the door, I reached for the handle, but just as my fingers brushed it, I heard something. A soft whisper, like someone was calling my name from the dark corners of the building. At first, I thought it was just the wind, maybe a passing truck that I didn't hear. But then the whisper came again. This time, I swear I heard a voice, soft, distant, but clear enough that I could have sworn it was saying my name. I froze. It wasn't just my imagination. It sounded like someone was inside, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I hadn't seen a single car here when I parked. I mean, no cars in the lot, no trucks, no one milling around. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I did what any tired, stupid person does in those situations. I knocked on the door, thinking maybe someone was just hiding in there, sleeping or something. Maybe they just didn't expect anyone to stop by. No answer. I knocked again, a little harder this time, my voice almost shaking. "Hello?" Nothing. That's when I heard it again, the whisper. Only this time it was louder, closer. Like someone was just behind the door, maybe just a few feet away, speaking directly into my ear. My heart dropped into my stomach. I could feel it. Something wasn't right. I turned around to leave, but that's when I noticed something even stranger. The parking lot was empty. Completely empty. I swear when I pulled in, there had been other cars parked, maybe a few trucks, but now, not a single car was in sight. The lights around me flickered, and I felt this unsettling pressure, like the air was thicker. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. I tried to call someone, anyone. My phone had been working fine for the past 6 hours of driving, but when I pulled it out, I saw that I had no signal. Nothing. For a moment, I stood there looking around, wondering if I had somehow imagined everything. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. I even told myself, maybe I'm just losing it. You've been driving for hours. But that's when I saw them. I couldn't make out much at first. Just shapes moving in the dark, just on the edge of the rest stop building. They weren't people. They were more like shadows, figures that shouldn't be there, drifting around the corners of my vision, and when I blinked, they were gone. I shook my head, trying to clear the fogginess in my brain, but every time I looked again, I saw more of them, faint, ghostly figures, slipping between the shadows like they were watching me. I don't know how much time passed. I wanted to leave. I knew I should have just gotten back in my car and driven away, but the strangest thing happened. I turned to look at my car, but it wasn't there anymore. I swear it was gone. I checked the lot again, hoping I was just misremembering where I parked, but there was no mistaking it. My car was nowhere to be found. Not a single car in sight, only those strange, unidentifiable shapes moving around, and the growing sense that I was being watched. Panic set in. I ran to the edge of the parking lot, hoping that my car had somehow moved further out of view, but no. Nothing. I turned around, almost expecting someone to be standing there, watching me from the shadows, but no one was there either. And that's when I noticed it, the map on my phone. I pulled it up again, feeling the creeping dread crawling up my spine. The rest stop was gone. I swear, when I had pulled off the highway, it had been there. But now, on the map, there was nothing. Just an empty stretch of highway. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. I thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I was just so tired I couldn't trust my own eyes. But every time I checked the map, the rest stop vanished, only to reappear for a second, just long enough to make my heart race. Then I saw it. A sign. Faint, like it had been burned into the dark sky. Leave now. I don't know if it was a hallucination or if it was really there, but I didn't stay to find out. I ran back to where the parking lot had been, but the pavement was gone. It was just a dark stretch of road. I don't remember how I got back to my car, or how long it took. But somehow I did. I've never driven that highway again. And the map? It's still haunted by the memory of that place, of the vanishing rest stop. The one that shouldn't exist, but always seems to be there if you're alone on the road at night. I still don't know what happened that night, and I've never tried to explain it to anyone. I can't. They'd think I was crazy. But I know this. Some things aren't meant to be understood. And if you're ever driving through a desolate highway rest stop in the middle of nowhere, don't stop. Trust me. You don't want to. Story 7. I guess I've always been one of those people who likes to take the long road. Not necessarily for any reason other than that I just enjoy the solitude of being behind the wheel, listening to the hum of the engine, and watching the landscape shift as I drive further away from the noise of the city. That's what I told myself that night when I decided to leave my place in the city and drive up to the mountains for a weekend getaway. I was just looking to clear my head, to get away from the chaos of my life for a few days. Nothing more. Nothing too strange. But now looking back, I don't know if I can ever trust the road or myself the same way again. It started innocently enough. I left my apartment around 8 p.m., figuring I'd get there around midnight. The drive was supposed to be simple, a few hours up the highway, then a turn onto a more isolated road that would take me into the mountains. It was late fall, the weather was crisp, and the moon was full. Everything felt like it was falling into place for the perfect road trip. For the first hour or so, I didn't think anything was off. I listened to my favorite podcast, the kind that makes you feel like you're talking to an old friend, and before I knew it, I was on a stretch of highway I'd never been on before. The signs were few, and they were starting to get less and less frequent. At first, I thought maybe I was just missing them. Maybe the road was just that remote, but soon I realized I had no idea where I was anymore. I checked my phone. No service. Nothing. The usual. I told myself I'd just keep driving. It was the kind of thought that, looking back, you realize was a bad idea. But at the time, it felt like the only choice. After what felt like hours, I rounded a bend, and out of nowhere, I saw this town. The road was narrow, but there it was, this little town in the distance, almost like it had appeared out of thin air. I couldn't remember seeing any signs for it. Nothing to warn me. It just was there. The strange thing? There weren't any other cars on the road. It felt like I was the only one out here. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I'd missed a sign somewhere, maybe I was further along than I thought. But I still had this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, something I couldn't quite shake. I slowed as I entered the town, and that's when I first noticed something was wrong. The streetlights were all glowing this odd, deep red. It wasn't like a regular streetlight. No, these were different, almost too red, like the kind of red you see on a neon sign for a strip club. But there weren't any signs of life. No cars parked along the roads, no lights on in the windows. It wasn't exactly a ghost town, but it felt like one. I drove slowly, looking around, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I thought about turning around, but that feeling, the one that had started creeping up on me, had already settled in deep, and I didn't want to be the person who chickened out. It was just a quiet, deserted town, right? I rolled my window down a little. There was no sound. Not the chirp of a distant cricket or the rustle of leaves. Nothing. I kept driving, my headlights cutting through the dark as the red lights from the street lamps flickered in a way that made my stomach tighten. I passed a few houses, all dark. No one around. It felt like I was in a place that existed in the middle of nowhere, isolated by more than just distance. It was something else, something more unsettling. I thought about calling my friend to talk about how weird it all felt, but of course, no signal. I didn't know what I was looking for. I wasn't lost exactly, but I definitely felt like I was no longer in control of the situation. I decided to drive a little deeper into the town, just to see if maybe there was a gas station or a place I could pull over to gather my thoughts. Maybe grab some directions. The further I went, though, the more I realized that this place didn't look like it had been inhabited in years. It wasn't just that it was empty. It was as if the buildings had never been touched, like they were frozen in time. Then I saw it, a figure, just standing in front of a house, staring at me. I almost didn't see them at first, almost thought it was a shadow, but as I got closer, I saw it more clearly, a tall figure, dressed in a dark coat, just standing there motionless. I slammed on the brakes. My heart pounded in my chest. I thought about honking, rolling down the window, asking if they were okay. But something about the way they just stared, no movement, no expression, stopped me cold. I didn't know why, but I felt like they were watching me, studying me. I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out what that meant. I drove on, quickly this time, my eyes glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the figure still standing there. But when I looked, there was nothing. The street behind me was empty. I could feel the tension in my chest, but I told myself it was nothing. Just someone out for a walk. Maybe they lived here. It didn't seem that strange, but it was. I took a few turns down more streets, my headlights bouncing off the red glow of the lights. The more I drove, the more I started to feel like I was trapped. I wasn't sure where I was anymore. but I knew I couldn't turn back the way I came. And then in the distance, I saw another figure. This time, there was no mistaking it, they were moving. Not toward me, but across the street, vanishing into an alleyway. It was a woman, wearing a long white dress. I slowed down, my hands gripping the wheel. My breath was shallow. What was she doing out here? In the middle of nowhere? I stared for a moment, then made the decision to keep driving. The road started to feel narrower, and then I realized I had no idea how to get out of here. The streets felt like a maze. The red lights started to feel oppressive, like they were closing in on me. I needed to find an exit, but everything looked the same. And that's when I saw something that made my heart freeze. I had just rounded another corner when I saw the buildings up ahead. They weren't houses or shops. No, these were tall, dark buildings stretching far above me. And in the distance, behind them, there was a faint glow, the same red glow as the streetlights. I thought I saw someone standing at the entrance to one of those buildings. A man. His face was obscured by the shadow of the doorframe, but I could tell he was looking at me. Not just staring, he was waiting. I knew I shouldn't stop. I knew it, but something compelled me to slow down. Something in the back of my mind told me that if I didn't stop, if I kept driving, I might never find my way out. The man stepped forward, slowly, and as he did, the red lights seemed to flicker, almost like they were responding to his movements. I felt a chill run through me. I don't know why I didn't drive away, but I didn't. I stayed there watching him. The man reached the edge of the road and just stood there. His eyes were too dark. It was like he was expecting something, or waiting for something. For me, I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Suddenly, there was movement behind me. I turned quickly, my heart racing. A group of figures, all dressed in dark clothing, had appeared from nowhere. They were walking in my direction. No one spoke. No one made a sound. They just walked. The footsteps echoed in the silence, growing louder and louder. That's when I knew. I wasn't in the middle of a town. I wasn't even on the road anymore. I was somewhere else. Somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Somewhere I couldn't leave. The figures moved closer, the red lights casting long shadows. And that's when I turned the car around, slammed the gas pedal, and never looked back. To this day, I still can't explain what happened. I don't know if the town was real, or if it was just a mirage, a hallucination, or something else entirely. I don't know if I was being watched by people, or something else. But I know one thing for sure, something was waiting there for me. And whatever it was, it's still out there. Sometimes I still feel those eyes on me, like I'm being watched, like I'm still there, in that red-lit town with no way to leave. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't take long roads. And if you ever find yourself in a place like that, a place with lights that flicker just a little too much, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. Story 8. I'll start this by saying that, at the time, I had no idea what was going on. I still don't really. But now that I've had some time to think it over, I wonder if what happened to me wasn't just a bad dream or a breakdown. I can't say for sure what it was, but if you've ever felt like something just wasn't right, but you couldn't put your finger on it, yeah, you know what I mean. And I'm hoping you'll listen to this, because maybe you'll understand what I went through. Maybe it'll even help you avoid it. So let me set the scene. My name's David. I'm 35 now, but this happened a few years ago. At the time, I lived in a small town in Ohio. Nothing fancy, just a regular place. I worked as a copywriter, and I mostly worked from home. My routine was as boring as you can imagine. I'd wake up, go for a run if I felt like it, sit down at my desk, write for hours, take breaks, do some grocery shopping, that kind of thing. The life of a freelance writer, I guess. It was just after midnight when I decided to take a drive. I had a bit of a long day, and I thought the road would clear my head. I needed to get out of the house, away from the screen for a while. So, I hopped into my car and just drove. The weather wasn't great, overcast, a light drizzle, but not enough to make me want to turn back. I'd been on this stretch of highway hundreds of times. It was just the highway that connected my town to a few other places. A straight road, with not much on either side, fields, gas stations, the occasional diner. But this night, it felt different. You ever get that feeling like someone's watching you, even when you're alone? Yeah, it was that kind of feeling. But I told myself it was just the rain or maybe the tiredness getting to me. Anyway, I kept driving. I passed the first exit after about 20 minutes, and then the second one, maybe 10 minutes later. I wasn't really paying attention, just lost in my thoughts. But then, something strange happened. I passed the third exit, and I thought, wait, that doesn't look right. I swear I'd seen that exit before. Not the sign itself, but the way the road bent, the buildings in the distance. I couldn't place it at first, but then it hit me. That exit, the one I just passed, wasn't that the same exit I'd passed earlier? The same one I'd just zoomed past 15 minutes ago. I brushed it off. Maybe I was just tired. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. I tried to shake it off, but I had this nagging feeling that I was going in circles. After a while, I pulled into a gas station to get some coffee and stretch my legs. The place was empty except for the clerk, who barely looked up when I walked in. She gave me a nod, said coffee's over there, and went back to fiddling with something behind the counter. I don't remember much of what I thought about while I sipped my coffee, but I remember the clerk's face. It was strange, like she was trying to act normal, but there was something off about her. Her smile felt rehearsed, and the way she spoke was too smooth, like she was reading from a script. I left after a few minutes, got back in my car, and continued driving. I started to notice something odd. I hadn't seen another car in the last hour. Not a single one. That's not totally unusual for a highway late at night, but still it felt wrong. I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I was being watched. I started to feel trapped. It's hard to describe, but it felt like I couldn't leave. It wasn't a physical thing. I wasn't stuck on the road, but every exit I took, no matter how far, seemed to lead me back to the same highway. I took one exit and drove for miles, then turned around and tried another. Same thing. No matter which way I went, I kept ending up back on the same road. I'll admit, by then, I started to feel a little panicked. My phone was dead, and I had no GPS, so I couldn't even check my location. I thought maybe I'd just missed something, maybe a turn that was supposed to lead me somewhere else. But when I looked at the signs, they didn't make sense. They kept repeating the same names over and over. Streets I didn't recognize, names of towns I'd never heard of. Nothing was matching up. It was like I was stuck in some kind of loop. I stopped again at a small motel. It looked like a place you'd see in an old movie. The sign was dim, flickering, but it had that kind of familiar charm that made me feel a little more grounded, like I could rest for a while. When I walked in, the guy at the front desk was strange. His voice was almost too low, like he was trying to keep something hidden. But again, I just brushed it off. He asked if I was staying for the night, and when I said yes, he gave me a room key. That's when it happened, when I first realized something wasn't right. When he handed me the key, he looked at me with this weird, intense gaze. "Room 5, he said. "That's the one you'll want." I nodded and smiled. It didn't mean anything, but when I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew me. That he knew me. It's hard to explain, but it was like he was waiting for me, like he'd been expecting me to show up. I decided to go to bed early, figuring I'd get up and head out in the morning. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the same strange noises, the creak of the floorboards above me, the hum of the air conditioner that felt too loud, like it was trying to drown out something. I kept thinking I heard footsteps in the hall outside my door, but when I looked, no one was there. Still, I couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. It was overwhelming, and I kept getting up, pacing the room. The next morning, when I checked out, the guy at the front desk barely acknowledged me. Same blank look, same monotone voice. "Have a safe trip," he said, just like the clerk at the gas station. Like he'd said the same words to every person who'd walked through that door. Maybe he had. By then, I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. I hadn't seen another car for hours. I hadn't seen anyone else on the road at all, and every time I stopped at another gas station or diner, it was the same story. The people I met didn't act right. They looked like they were stuck in some kind of loop, repeating the same phrases, acting like they knew me when I was certain I'd never seen them before. And the exits, The exits kept bringing me back to the same stretch of road. I tried everything. I took different exits, turned the car around, and even tried backtracking. Nothing worked. And then it hit me. There was no way off. I wasn't just lost. I was stuck. I was trapped. And that's when it all came together for me. The gas stations, the motels, the weird, rehearsed conversations. It wasn't just strange. It was like I was being kept there. Like the people I was encountering weren't real. It was like they were part of I don't know, a simulation, a parallel universe, or something. Something wrong. There was one final moment. I passed another exit, and the sign was the same as the others. I knew it was pointless, but I took it anyway. When I got off, I drove for a while, and I saw a town in the distance, just like all the others. But when I reached it, it was the same as the others, too. Same motels, same gas stations, same people, same everything. It was like I'd never left. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just stuck on some random highway. I wasn't lost. I was trapped in some kind of nightmare, stuck between worlds, between realities. And I had no idea how to get out. So I'm still here. I don't know how long it's been, but I've stopped trying to escape. I've learned the routine. The gas stations, the motels, the people, they're all the same. I keep driving, and I keep seeing the same exits. I'm starting to think this is it. I'm stuck here for good, and I have no idea what happens when you stay here too long. But I'll tell you this. If you ever find yourself driving down an empty stretch of road, and you feel like something's wrong, something you can't quite put your finger on, maybe you should stop. Because you might not get the chance to turn around. Some roads, they don't end. Story 9. I never believed in superstitions. I always thought they were just stories people made up to explain the things they couldn't understand. That was before the night I heard the voice. It's something that still chills me to this day. I'm not saying I've become some sort of believer in the supernatural or anything. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes there are things that happen that don't make sense, and you're left questioning everything you thought you knew about the world. This is one of those things. It all started a few months ago, back in the fall. My name's Jake, I'm 28, and at the time, I was living in a small town about an hour away from the city. You know, one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and nothing exciting ever really happens. I worked a 9-to-5 job at a small marketing firm, and like most people, my life was fairly predictable. Same routine every day, wake up, work, grab a bite, go home. Most of the time, the drive home was the worst part of my day. I lived out on the outskirts of town, and the road I took was a dark, winding highway with barely any streetlights. It was peaceful in its own way, but it could also be unsettling, especially late at night when the only thing you could hear was the sound of your own tires on the asphalt. On this particular night, I was coming home a little later than usual. My boss had asked me to stay late to wrap up a project, and I'd been in a bad mood ever since. The drive was always lonely, but tonight it felt different. The air outside was colder than usual, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible as you exhale. I remember I kept the windows up and the heater on, just to keep myself warm. I flipped the radio on, trying to drown out my thoughts. It was one of those moments where you don't really care what's on. You just need the noise. At first, all I could hear was static. You know, that low, crackling sound you get when you're between stations. I tried adjusting the dial a few times, but nothing seemed to improve. Then I heard it. A voice. Faint at first, almost inaudible. It was so quiet that I almost thought I imagined it. But then it came again, clearer this time. Jake! I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't believe it. I mean, what are the odds, right? Someone calling my name through the radio, in the middle of nowhere. I immediately tried to rationalize it. Static. Maybe it was a glitch in the signal. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence. But then it came again, louder this time. Jake! My grip tightened on the steering wheel, my mind racing. My heart started pounding in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just tired, maybe imagining things. So, I changed the station. A few clicks and nothing. The static returned. Then that voice. This time, it sounded almost urgent. Jake, slow down. It's not safe ahead. I stared at the radio in disbelief. My first instinct was to laugh it off. It wasn't possible. It had to be some sort of prank. Maybe it was a late-night DJ messing around, or some obscure radio show. But still, that voice, it didn't sound like a joke. It felt too real, too personal. I glanced at the road, trying to focus. It was dark out, but the headlights were cutting through the empty highway. There was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. I'd driven this road hundreds of times before. The idea that something could be wrong never even crossed my mind. But then I heard the voice again. This time, it was even clearer, louder, more persistent. "Jake, stop the car. There's something in front of you. You're driving right into it. Stop." I slammed the brakes without thinking, the tires screeching as I jerked the car to a halt. My heart was racing, and I was shaking. For a moment, everything felt silent, like the world had paused. I could see the empty road stretching out ahead of me, illuminated by my headlights, but there was nothing in sight. I was still gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I felt ridiculous, my pulse still thumping in my ears. There was nothing there. No truck, no vehicle, no obstacle. Just an empty, dark stretch of road. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It had to be some sort of malfunction with the radio. That's all. I couldn't explain it any other way. I checked the dial again. Still static. No sign of any voice, just the crackling sound of empty air. I tried to shake it off and started driving again, the car slowly picking up speed. My mind was still racing. What the hell had just happened? Was I losing it? Was I just overtired, imagining things? But then it happened again. "Jake, you're going the wrong way." I couldn't ignore it anymore. My eyes went wide, and I looked around, my breath shallow. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. No headlights. No cars behind me. Just the empty road stretching on forever. I looked at the GPS on my phone to check my location, but I already knew where I was. I had another 20 minutes before I'd reach home. I took a turn off the highway, hoping to find a place to pull over and figure out what the hell was going on. The road twisted, lined with trees and no streetlights. It was eerily quiet. Too quiet. "Jake, you're almost there. It's just up ahead. Don't go any further." I couldn't breathe. The voice was back, clearer than ever, and this time, it sounded almost urgent. My hands were sweating, the grip on the wheel slipping as my vision blurred from anxiety. What was I supposed to do? I wasn't far from a small bridge that crossed over a creek. I knew the area well. No other cars ever came down here at this time of night. I turned the corner, heading toward the bridge. My headlights illuminated the road ahead, and that's when I saw it. A figure. It was standing just at the edge of the bridge, barely visible in the darkness. At first, I thought it was a person, but something was wrong. The figure was standing motionless, barely shifting, like it was waiting. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. My foot hovered over the brake, my eyes locked on the figure as I came closer. I should have turned around. I should have just left, but I was frozen. And then, just as I passed, the figure stepped into the beam of my headlights. It wasn't a person. It was something else. I couldn't describe it, couldn't explain it. It wasn't human. There was something off about it, something that made every instinct in my body scream at me to get out of there. And just like that, the radio went silent. No more voice. I couldn't think. My heart was pounding in my chest as I slammed my foot on the gas, driving as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I don't know what that thing was, or who was talking to me through the radio. But when I finally reached home, I could still hear that voice in my head, repeating over and over. "Don't go back." That night, I locked every door, every window, and sat in the dark, staring at the radio in the corner of my room, terrified of what I might hear next. But it was silent. The next day, I went back to the bridge, hoping to make sense of it all. I found nothing. No sign of anything strange. No figure. Just an ordinary, quiet spot. But every time I drove that road after, the hairs on my neck stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. To this day, I have no idea what I saw that night, and I haven't been able to bring myself to drive that road again. Every time I hear the crackling of static on the radio, I'm reminded of that voice. I don't know if it was a warning, a coincidence, or something else. But whatever it was, it's out there. And if you're driving at night, alone on a quiet road, be careful. Because sometimes, it's not the dark you need to fear. Sometimes, it's what's waiting for you in the silence. And sometimes, the voices on the radio aren't just static. If you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more stories that might just keep you up at night.